In January 2005, Sarbjit Athwal reveals a deadly secret. A secret she's kept for 7 years. Her sister-in-law was murdered during a family trip to India.
Surjit was drugged, strangled, and her body was thrown in the river.
The killing was ordered by Sarbjit's cruel and domineering mother-in-law, a callous punishment for wanting a divorce.
She felt she had the right to terminate Surjit's life because it was best for her family.
She's letting people know, if you step out of line, I will kill you.
And for years, Sarbjit was terrified that she could be next if she dared to utter a word.
My normality was terror. A woman once called my mum. She was actually a murderer.
Britain's Darkest Taboos reveals the shocking true stories behind the most horrific acts of familial crime, including murder.
He stood up and licked the blood off the knife and he spat down her body.
Torture.
People call him an animal, but he's not an animal. An animal wouldn't do that to another animal.
And abuse.
I probably should have died, and I tell you what, I wish I had.
Hayes in Middlesex, an area with a large Sikh community. There's a strong tradition here for arranged marriage. And in 1989, 19-year-old Sarbjit Kaur Athwal meets the man she's supposed to marry.
It's really, really strange because I had no choice and I felt like I was being pressured. And I had to think about my parents as well. I didn't want to let them down. I had to think about the honour or the shame I would bring to the family if I had said no. So I accepted what was being offered and I said yes, and we went ahead with it.
Sarbjit marries her husband on Saturday the 8th of October 1989, but the wedding is not the happiest of occasions.
When I got married in 1989, it's a massive ceremony and it went on for days and days and days, up to about 5 days. On my wedding day at the temple, we were blessed by all the family, all the guests that were there. They were giving us blessings, wishing us luck for the future.
It's traditional in Sikh weddings for the groom's parents to bless the married couple by placing their hands on the bride and groom's heads. This picture serves as a telling insight into how the mother-in-law felt about her son's new wife.
My father-in-law blessed me, but my mother-in-law chose not to. So that was quite hurtful. That was quite painful, thinking it was my big day. I got married and I wasn't really blessed.
But why would Bachan Athwal choose not to bless her new daughter-in-law, in line with tradition? Emma Kenny is a psychologist and has been looking into what this photo means.
A wedding in the Sikh community is a huge affair and it's really important that certain rituals are carried out. And one of those key rituals is being blessed by the mother and father-in-law. Now, this doesn't happen for Sarbjit. In fact, the mother-in-law purposely only blesses her son, and this is such a powerful message. She's basically letting the community know that she values her son only, and that this woman who's entering the family is potentially not good enough.
After the wedding, Sarbjit begins to settle into her new life and gets to know Bachan Athwal, the woman who refused to bless her.
I moved into my in-laws' house and I met my mother-in-law, and I remember my mother-in-law saying to me, now that you're married into this family and we are your new mum and dad.
The moment that Sarbjit moves in with her new family and in-laws, she's given an incredibly powerful message. Bachan lets her know that she is now officially her mother. If Bachan had done this to impart a sense of belongingness and connectedness to her new daughter-in-law, letting her know that even though she's living with her, consider her a mother, this would be compassionate and caring. But that's not the message. The message is, now you are with me, I own you, and your family don't matter anymore.
But it was really, really difficult at that age, because you're so young at 19 and trying to adapt to a marriage life when you just left school. And especially going into a family where it wasn't your choice, and trying to adapt to that family, get to know your new family. And it was really, really difficult, but I knew I had to make an effort, because that was my life, that was my family for the rest of my life.
Just a few days into her marriage, Sarbjit has huge reservations about her new family. It's at this time she gets to know her sister-in-law, Surjit.
Surjit was quite young. She was 18 at that time. She seemed like a really sweet girl.
Surjit's already been married into the Athwal family for a year. Her brother is Jagdeesh.
Surjit was a sparkly child, always lively, always excited, always in the thick of the action, always very confident, always very playful.
But whereas Sarbjit had a very traditional Sikh background, Surjit had a mixture of experiences.
There were influences of the traditional indigenous Punjabi lifestyle, coupled with the obvious presence of Western television, Western schooling, Western friends and Western open life. Pop music was a part of our life, girls and boys were part of our life. You know, all the usual bits and pieces that you see going on in any typical life, we were involved.
The Athwals are a respectable Sikh family, and at just 16, Surjit agrees to marry the eldest son, Sukhdev, to fulfill her grandmother's dying wish. But her wedding day photo would reveal how she's really feeling. Laura Richards advises police forces across the UK to raise understanding of honour-based crimes. She believes much can be read into this simple wedding day photo.
This is a picture of Surjit on her wedding day, and you can certainly see she looks quite childlike. That's my initial observation, just how young she looks, and her head bowed. She's certainly not the picture of a blushing, happy bride. And when you see him sat next to her, he certainly looks considerably older. So I should imagine that this is, given that it's not somebody that she has chosen, this would be quite a frightening and daunting thing.
And off she went to join this whole new, big, large, domineering family, demanding upon her how she should conform to the model wife, how she should cook, how she should earn, what she should dress as, how she should speak, and how she should serve the family household.
Surjit and Sarbjit are made to feel worthless. Their lives are no longer their own.
My role in the family after I got married was to cook and clean, take care of the family, take care of the extended family if they were coming around, cooking and cleaning, and accompanying our mother-in-law to other occasions, and if people were coming around our house, make sure that everything was in place. And it was really difficult understanding certain rules out in the house. Made an effort and tried my best to get on with the family, get to love the man I was married to.
Bachan is already dominant in his household. But then 6 months after Sarbjit's marriage, her father-in-law dies, and things change dramatically.
In Sikh culture, when the father dies, instantly the eldest son essentially takes control over running the family. However, a family meeting is summoned, and Bachan stands up to tell the entire family that she is now in control. She is the matriarch. So, aside from the fact that she's giving a powerful message to everybody in that room, ironically, she's also going against the culture that she very much pretends to uphold.
She was constantly in charge, and she did rule the house, and she would tell us what to do instead of discussing it with us. She would just tell us what to do and what was expected, and we had to follow that.
As every day passes, Bachan's hold over the family grows, and she is increasingly dominant over her sons too.
It felt like my mother-in-law was more important than we were in their lives, because instead of discussing things with us, they run it past their mum first, and whatever she said would be the final say.
Both women are desperately unhappy, but know they have a duty to respect their Sikh traditions. In 1991, they both become mothers at the same time. Bachan would see this as a chance to impose her own views on how the babies should be raised.
There was times where we were breastfeeding our first child, and she would look at us and she would say, the baby's not happy, maybe we should put him on the bottle. When we were out one day, I rushed home to feed my baby, and the baby was sleeping. Then I was going to wake her up and I was going to feed her, and she said, oh, I've already fed her. She goes, you don't need to feed her, can you start the cooking? And that was really shocking for me. And I really felt upset, thinking, even that right has been taken away from me.
Bachan Athwal is intent on controlling every aspect of her daughter-in-law's lives. The babies are just another way in which she can exert her domination. Surjit needs an outlet. She begins a secret diary. A diary that speaks volumes.
Since being married to my husband, I found it very impossible to compromise with him. Every time I would try talking to him, he would disagree and involve his mother in our marriage. When I had my baby, his mother took my child away from me and would get the baby to call her mummy. My baby grew up more attached to my mother-in-law. I was told I was an incapable mother by my husband and his family. We tend to see victims, and certainly I've worked on a lot of so-called honour-based violence cases where there's abuse in the name of so-called honour, and victims will use diaries as a way of expressing their frustration and their upset and their anger about how they feel. And it can be quite a cathartic thing for anybody to write things down, but of course it provides a real insight in terms of what's going on.
The diaries would just be the start of Surjit's fight to take back control of her life. She's been brought up to be independent, and that independence could not be suppressed.
So I just started rebelling. She was, her dress code was completely different. She'd becoming more westernised. She had cut her hair, so she started wearing makeup. She seemed a lot more happier. She started making new friends, and she started going out. She started drinking. And then her husband started noticing, and he would beat her up and shout and scream at her. Then my mother-in-law found out after a while, and she would do the same. But that didn't stop Surjit.
This would have done two things. It would have filled Bachan with rage because she wasn't controlling the daughter-in-law in the way that she wished to. But it would have also given Surjit a taste of liberation. And that taste of liberation would have upped her confidence. So now we have a real battle on our hands. Bachan versus Surjit.
This newfound confidence grows day by day. Surjit is going out more and making new friends. Then in 1998, she does the unthinkable. She tells Sukhdev the marriage is over.
It's only logical that she wanted out of this horrible marital relationship. It wasn't a marriage. It was a false marriage. It was a horrible marriage, and there was nothing authentic about that relationship. She wanted out.
Surjit chooses to leave her husband, and that means leaving the clutches of her mother-in-law. This would have taken such courage, because essentially she's shaming her family, and the wider community were going to judge her. So removing herself from it was about walking free from chains of culture that she did not feel she could associate with.
My mother-in-law went completely mad, and she goes, I've got to do something about this.
She said to me, I recall, on one occasion, your sister will have divorce over my dead body.
Bachan flies into a murderous rage. She's losing control of her family and would soon set in motion an evil plan to reinstate her power.
And she said that she was going to get rid of Surjit.
And I think Surjit, in her desperation, grasped that deal to her death.
In 1998, Sarbjit Athwal is in an unhappy arranged marriage and living with her dominant mother-in-law, Bachan Athwal.
She would just tell us what to do and what was expected, and we had to follow that.
Her sister-in-law, Surjit, a mother of two, has had enough and plans to divorce her husband, Sukhdev. But Bachan and Sukhdev have other ideas in mind.
My mother-in-law spoke to Surjit and said that before you have your divorce, I want you to come to a family trip to India with me. I didn't want to go on my own. Just come with me and meet the family out there, do your duty as a daughter-in-law, and then when you come back, you can have your divorce.
Surjit thinks this is an entirely innocent trip. But then, in a secret meeting shortly before they leave, Bachan reveals that she has a deadly plan, a plan that would leave Sarbjit paralysed with fear.
She had decided that Surjit was becoming too westernised. She wasn't behaving like the dutiful wife or the daughter-in-law, and she had to put a stop to the way she was behaving. So she would be taken to India and they would get rid of her.
Sarbjit is terrified. She knows her sister-in-law's life is in danger, but feels powerless to act.
First I thought she was saying it out of anger, but I knew the way she was talking in a strong voice, she meant what she said.
Imagine that power that she's exerting, this omnipotent force that if she chooses to can strike down any member who defies her or the family. That's exactly what Bachan is doing. She's letting people know, if you step out of line, I will kill you.
It wasn't until some days later that she took Surjit to India. And then before she left, she came up to me and she said that if you speak to anybody about this, you know what's going to happen. And I saw Surjit leaving in that morning, and I still wanted to say something. I wanted to warn her, but my mother-in-law stood there, kept staring at me.
Although she's frozen with fear, Sarbjit feels she has to act. She summons up the courage to report her mother-in-law.
On the day they left, I went into a phone box. I rang Crime Stoppers and I told them everything that I heard at the plan. I was hoping they would do something to save Surjit. And after that, I wrote a letter to my local police station, again outlining every little detail they would have needed to know to put a stop to this or get Surjit to a place of safety.
But despite Sarbjit's efforts, Surjit is whisked away and flown to India. This video shows Surjit in India at the family wedding. She appears happy. Bachan is at her side. Criminal behaviour analyst Laura Richards has reviewed this footage.
So in this particular set of images from the family wedding, it's a very traditional wedding again, and it's very clear that she is being the dutiful daughter-in-law. She's engaging with people. She's certainly, in terms of the difference between her own wedding and this particular wedding, she seems much older. There are moments where she's smiling and she's engaging with people, but I should imagine this would be quite a difficult trip for her.
Two weeks later, Bachan Athwal returns, and she's alone.
Surjit's daughter came running in saying that, "Where's my mummy?" And my mother-in-law saying, "Oh, she loved India so much, she's going to be back soon," a couple of days later.
As the days pass, Bachan continues to spin her web of lies.
And after some time, there's all other stories being told that Surjit had run away. And her daughter was told that your mum's run away, she doesn't love you, she's not going to come back, and she's left you. And watching the little girl, that was really, really heartbreaking and upsetting.
Sarbjit knows Bachan is lying, but she's terrified. Finally, though, she confronts her mother-in-law.
I wanted to hear it from her, so I kept pushing her, saying, "Where's Surjit?" And she wouldn't speak at first, then all of a sudden the power came back into her voice and she became that strong, dominating woman again. And she looked at me and she goes, Surjit's been taken care of. She looked at me and she goes, Surjit was driven out in a jeep, and Surjit was drugged, strangled, and her body was thrown in the river. And my body just went all weak when she told me that, and I was sick to my stomach, and I couldn't understand what I had just heard.
While Sarbjit isn't directly threatened as far as her own life is concerned, the very message that she is being given by her mother-in-law is, I am capable of killing anyone who gets in my way. And that message is enough to keep somebody silent.
Sarbjit's darkest fears have been confirmed. Meanwhile, Jagdeesh, Surjit's brother, is becoming increasingly suspicious about where his sister has gone. He goes to visit the Athwal family.
And they gave me a whole shebang of, oh, don't panic, don't worry, don't need to create a commotion. This will draw attention to the family. You'll be in the spotlight, we'll be in the spotlight. You know your sister was a bit loose, you know your sister was a bit uncontrolled. She was going out with various men. You know that she had boyfriends. She's run off with a boyfriend more than likely. Just calm, settle down, don't create a fire when there's no need for one.
But Jagdeesh is not convinced. Something is not adding up.
Everyone was cold, everyone was nervous. Thought, no, whether she's actually run away deliberately or not, going to the police is not going to do any harm to this case. In fact, it will help the case. And I went shot down to the police station.
The police do investigate, but they struggle to find any evidence of murder. Jagdeesh, however, believes there has to be a more sinister explanation to his sister's disappearance. He's determined to get the answers.
We as a family were gasping, fighting, agonising. Where do we go? Are we ever going to get justice? No body, no witnesses, no nothing. No admissions. Are we going to ever get justice?
Jagdeesh vows to fight for justice. Meanwhile, Sarbjit is still living with a self-confessed murderer and her deadly secret.
My normality was terror. A woman once called my mum. She was actually a murderer. And she was like, had no bad feelings about this at all. She was calm. She was proud at what she had done. And she kind of accepted that it was done. And I had to accept it too. And I couldn't speak to anybody about this for many, many years.
A lack of evidence means the case is not pursued. 4 years pass by. Sarbjit lives in terror. Jagdeesh continues his fight. Bachan and Sukhdev think they've got away with murder. But then in 2005, there's a breakthrough. Laura Richards is working with a homicide prevention unit at the Metropolitan Police, looking at cold cases. The force reopens the file on Surjit's disappearance.
Well, initially this case was in 1998, a missing persons case, and there wasn't a huge amount of investment in the investigation because the family were very much saying, well, she just decided to stay over in India, there's no crime here. But her family were the ones that were saying there is no way that she should, she would have just walked out on her family, on her 2 young children. This is totally out of character.
A new team is brought in to reinvestigate. After years of campaigning, Jagdeesh receives the news.
I remember vividly sitting at home, exhausted, despondent. And then lo and behold, in amidst that despondency, a magical call, a godsend.
That godsend is DCI Clive Driscoll, a senior investigator at the Metropolitan Police. Almost immediately, the alarm bells are ringing.
We do know that she was due to return on the 18th of December. We do know that she'd arranged meetings with people after the 18th. There was every reason for her to come home. She was doing extremely well at work. There was a chance she could be promoted. There was no reason why she would stay.
The investigation is moving forward, and then a major piece of the jigsaw falls into place. The stress of living with a killer finally takes its toll on Sarbjit. She gets rushed into hospital with a burst stomach ulcer and knows that she must tell the truth.
Thinking that I might die, I told my dad what happened to Surjit. And my mum and dad both sat there in shock looking at me, thinking all these years you've lived in the same family.
For Sarbjit to realise that essentially the information she has been holding for so many years on what happened to her sister-in-law is out would have been terrifying. She's still living with the family who did this, and she now knows that because she's shared that information, her own life is at risk. This is such a precarious time for her emotionally, but also shows that no matter how broken a human being can become, deep within them there is always strength. And at this point, Sarbjit has found hers.
Sarbjit's father wants action. Knowing the police are reinvestigating, he calls Clive Driscoll to arrange a secret meeting, away from the watchful eye of the murderous mother-in-law and her son Sukhdev.
I can remember exactly when I first met Sarbjit. It was actually in her father's house. She never once looked at me. She kept her head down. It was fairly obvious to me this was a woman that was absolutely terrified.
I just told him, and I said, my sister-in-law's not gone missing, she's been murdered. And he looked at me and he goes, can you repeat yourself? So I repeated myself again to him. And I said, Surjit's been murdered.
Clive Driscoll now has a crucial witness, but will Sarbjit find the courage to stick to her story when her mother-in-law realises the net is closing in?
Sarbjit Athwal was petrified. And I'd have to say that for 2 days, I wasn't far behind her.
In 1998, a young mother of 2, Surjit Athwal, disappears following a family wedding in India. She's been murdered. Her death was ordered by her evil mother-in-law, Bachan Kaur, and husband, Sukhdev. A callous punishment for wanting a divorce.
Surjit was drugged, strangled, and her body was thrown in the river. And my body just went all weak when she told me that.
With no concrete evidence, the case was not pursued for years, but now DCI Clive Driscoll has travelled to a tiny village in the Punjab in search of the truth.
I decided very early on that we should go to India. The murder was in India. If there was a murder committed in England, you would always go and visit the scene, and you try and get from the murder scene as much as you can. You try to get from the people who would know were in India, weren't they? What we discovered was effectively that, Surjit Athwal just walked out of the house and, got in a taxi and went to the airport. Well, you have to be reasonable. Surjit Athwal was born here. She was English. I have to say that I think I'd have found it difficult to leave that village.
Officers also come across this video, which reveals Surjit's last movements and provides vital clues as to what happens next.
When somebody's a missing person, the police would be wanting to establish exactly what the events were leading up to them going missing. The family saying that she went over to India and it was her choice not to come back, and they went to this family wedding. They would be looking to corroborate that story. But here she is immersed in this family wedding in the middle of nowhere. So why would she decide amongst a room full of strangers to stay there when Bachan comes back, when she doesn't know a soul over there, and the fact that it's such an isolated area, there's no way she would have just walked off.
But the police don't just have the video to go on. There are also crucial clues in Surjit's diary.
The way that the police work, if you find out how somebody lived, you tend to find out how they've died. So it's important that diaries or information about the victim, all those things are pieced together, the victimology of what's happening. And that's a critical start point for any investigation.
Clive Driscoll and his team spend weeks interviewing witnesses in a bid to back up Sarbjit's account of murder. Finally, he's able to piece together a picture of what happened to Surjit.
It is my view that Surjit Athwal was tricked into thinking she was going to Amritsar, which is a bit like St Paul's over here, to do shopping. Along the way, she was driven to an area close to the River Ravi. But there she was strangled. Her gold was removed from her. She was then thrown into the River Ravi. The gold was then taken to a local Gurdwara to say, we've just actually sort of disposed of a family problem and here's a few quid to help us on our way.
Clive Driscoll is slowly building a strong case, but there's a vital link missing. Sarbjit has spent years fearing she could be next if she dared to utter a word. She's so scared, she's refusing to give evidence in court. Driscoll must win her trust.
And I also told him that my mother-in-law had said that if I tell anybody, the same thing would happen to me. So I got the impression he understood, but I didn't trust him.
For Sarbjit, learning to trust anyone after she'd been so badly let down would have been difficult, but we're talking about a white Western male who's a police officer. Gaining her trust must have been huge, but it was also the thing that meant that the family who deserved to be brought to justice were brought to justice.
The conversation I had was to give her my word that we would do the best we can to ensure her safety, and that was on the phone, and she was incredibly emotional. But to her eternal credit, and I admire, my admiration for what she did holds no bounds. She did come forward, she did leave her house, she gave an ABE interview, then returned to her house. And that was a big step forward in this investigation.
As soon as I got home, my husband was already at home. And when he opened the door, I was completely shaken. I didn't know whether he knew where I'd been. And he asked me, and I had to just make an excuse up and said I'd just been shopping. And I quickly ran upstairs and occupied myself with the little baby. And he kept asking me where I had been, why I was quiet, because I was so scared in case he found out.
Sarbjit Athwal was petrified, and I'd have to say that for 2 days I wasn't far behind her.
Sarbjit tries her best to pretend everything is normal. But then a bombshell. The local newspaper reports that police are getting close to finding who killed Surjit Athwal.
That caused Mrs Athwal some serious worries, as it would. And I think she was questioned by the family, and at the time she was still trying to keep keep at home with her family whilst assisting the police.
The net is closing in on Bachan and Jagdeesh Athwal, and they instantly blame Sarbjit.
The family clearly know that somebody within their unit has been talking to the authorities because they know too much information, the dates, the times and the incidents. And this instantly means the suspicion falls on Sarbjit.
Several days after she gives her statement, come the words Sarbjit hoped she would never hear.
And my mother looked at me and she said to me, she goes, since you've been married, you haven't been to India. You haven't met my family out there. She said, we're going to take a trip to India.
I remember it with a chill that Bachan Kaur suggested to Mrs Athwal she should go to India, that she hadn't been to India, and that she should go to India. And I think, really, if you're asking for a police officer's opinion, that was probably is enough. And we then really was suggesting to Mrs Athwal that she should leave that house and allow us to protect her.
Police suspect Bachan and Jagdeesh Athwal are planning a carbon copy murder.
Basically, she's saying to her daughter-in-law, I am sentencing you to death.
They know what they are doing and can act quickly. Sarbjit's life could now be in danger. October 2005. The Metropolitan Police are investigating a cold case. Surjit Athwal was murdered in a killing arranged by her mother-in-law and husband 7 years ago. Surjit's sister-in-law has finally spoken out. But now her life could be in danger.
She said, we're gonna take a trip to India. And that's when I realised that I had to get out.
DCI Clive Driscoll has given his word that he'll protect Sarbjit, and there's no way he's going to let her down.
We had one murder in India. I didn't fancy a second one. We actually wanted to wait a bit longer, if I was honest. But that went out the window because we have a massive obligation to protect people, and that goes past everything. And so we felt we should move quicker.
On the 3rd of November 2005, officers finally arrest Bachan Athwal and her son Sukhdev for murder.
I felt safe knowing that the people who have done this, who have been part of it at least, have been taken away and they will be dealt with.
But even though her mother-in-law's in custody, for Sarbjit, the intimidation continues. Her children are still in the family home, and they'll be used as a powerful pawn to persuade her to retract her statement.
They used my kids against me. They knew they were my weakness. And always reminding me that if you don't back out, you're not going to see your kids.
But Clive Driscoll has built a strong relationship with Sarbjit. She trusts him. This trust keeps her strong.
Because of the relationship that Sarbjit has built with Clive Driscoll, she does not retract her statement. And it's testament to the confidence that he has instilled in her of the authorities and her belief personally in him that sees Bachan and Sukhdev brought to the justice that they deserve.
Clive kept me going, and he was my strength. He gave me strength, gave me faith, and gave me hope to carry on going.
April 2007. Bachan Athwal and her son are on trial for murder. It's a difficult time for Sarbjit. She's told she can't speak to Clive Driscoll until after the trial.
Kind of felt like I was on my own again. And even though there was officers helping me, but my strength was coming from Clive. He kept me going and he gave me hope.
I say this to all my witnesses, just tell the truth. That's all you got to do, just tell the truth. Because the reality is you'll never forget that. If you go there and try and spin a yarn, you'll forget that, that's for sure, and, but just go and tell the truth and that will beam through.
The trial was a very long, draining, stressful 15 weeks. She was dismissive, evasive. She wouldn't answer questions fully. She would deliberately avoid questions. She would just go into a chorus of denials. Not me, Surjit is not dead. Don't know, can't answer, blah, blah, blah. Pretend that she doesn't. Dramatically, she would pretend I don't understand English, and then when comments were being made by the judge, she would interject in English. So proving you're lying to the court about your knowledge of English.
I think with women we always expect them to be maternal and to have that element to them, but I remember seeing Bachan at court and I was surprised at how small she was, of course she doesn't look like a dangerous person, but she was very clinical and very cold in the execution of the plan.
After a long court case spanning 3 months, Bachan and Sukhdev are found guilty of murder and jailed for life.
And I remember seeing Mr. Jagdeesh Singh standing on his own. I just went over to him and congratulated him and said, "Well done, sir. Your sister would be very proud of you." And I can remember it now because he just went, "I never thought I would ever see the day that those 2 people were convicted."
After 9 years, we finally got justice. That felt good.
It strikes me that for whatever reason, She felt she had the right to terminate Surjit's life because it was best for her family. Madness.
With Bachan and Sukhdev behind bars, Surjit's memory can be honoured in the right way.
Surjit was a wonderful, exciting, bubbly person. I think her whole life was drained of fun, joy, happiness by the horrible Athwal experience. And we can only keep her pictures, speculate, think about her. What if she was alive? What if this? What if that? Her life was a sacrifice.
She's always going to be in my heart. Surjit will always be in my heart, and there were times we spent together and we had happy memories, although mother-in-law made it impossible at times. But I will always remember her in my heart.
Sarbjit is finally rebuilding her life. She's qualified as a police community support officer and is helping the police to stop these kind of cases happening again.
I'm going to set up my own charity and help other victims of similar situations, because I don't want them to go through what I did, and be their support and courage and help them get their voices to the police and seek justice. I know it's going to take time to get there, but I've got hopes I can.
Clive Driscoll and Sarbjit are now the closest of friends.
I know that anytime I have a problem I can pick up the phone and call him and get advice. And just goes to show that when he gave me his word in 2005, up until now, he still kept it. That means a lot.